the rights are about taqwa. That is why that surah begins by focusing on this idea of being conscientious about your relationship with Allah and with His creation. So the huquq within marriage, right, is when you enter into marriage in Islam, marriage is not like in Christianity. Traditionally, it was actually considered to be a religious, it was actually considered to be one of the sacraments. In Islam, it's a contractual agreement at the primary level. And the thing about entering into a contractual agreement is the agreement will tell you what's expected of you as a partner and what's expected of the other party. That's the nature of a contractual agreement, is one party is expected to do something, the other party is expected to do something, and then they share in the benefits of the contractual agreement. But if one party breaks their side of the contract, then it's something. Or if both do it, you can have both. But if one does it, then the contract's breaking down. And that's why, when we get married, we're supposed to actually know what the contractual agreement is. And a lot of Muslims go into the relationship and they don't know what it is. They've just made a contract because they say in every marriage, right? What do we say? أَنْكَحْتُكَ عَلَى كِتَابِ اللَّهِ وَسُنَّةِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. I'm marrying you with the book of Allah and the Sunnah. Then, well, what does that mean if you don't know what it means? And that's what happens. They say, okay, because they're just thinking about getting married, but they're not thinking about what they were doing when they were getting married, which is they were going into a contractual agreement that's based on rules and regulations. And where do they come from? Kitab Allah wa Sunnat al-Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if you didn't do that when you got married, and then you start getting all these problems not working out, well, it's broke down at the contractual level. I mean, there might be other reasons, but more often than not, they're actually related to one side not agreeing to the contract, and more often than not, the other side that's being oppressed in it doesn't know what the contract was in the first place, so they don't even know that they're getting stinted in the relationship. And then it just goes from one disaster to another, and then what will happen, because human beings are so adept at entering into dysfunctional relationships that begin with your families, and I mean, we learn how to do it with our siblings. We learn how to, siblings get it. You can see it with your children. They learn very quickly how to rile the other one up. They know exactly what to say, and they know the reaction they're going to get. And they'll do it with that little smirk on their face, and they derive pleasure out of it, right? This is what happens. And you have to teach them and do these things to try to get them out. That's infantile behavior. Well, unfortunately, the infantile behavior often is never outgrown. And so what happens is the husband and the wife will learn quickly what pushes the buttons of the other. And that's a whole other class, right, of why people do that stuff. But there are reasons why they do it. There really are. And the worst ones are when it's a cycle of violence, because those become very, very strange. And there's a lot of really, study the literature on those things. It's very, very strange stuff goes on in domestic violence. And police who deal with domestic violence will tell you the most unbelievable stories about trying to save somebody in one of those relationships, because they're ill, they're really unwell. The people are very unhealthy, and they often don't know how unhealthy they are, and they can't get out of the relationships, and they don't want to at the conscious level. I mean, nobody wants that relationship in reality. The soul doesn't want it. But unfortunately, the nature of the nafs is that it can get some very, very sick satisfaction out of these type of relationships. So when you enter into the contractual agreement, you should know what it is, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that the men have rights and the women have rights. The rights of the husband, which I'm going to deal with first, because they're not that many. They're really not, in relation to what the women get. And the problem is, if you haven't gone through this before, the men are going to all demand these rights, and then the women are going to they won't know that there's a whole other group that go for them. The main maintenance, right, is a responsibility of men upon women. Qawama is on men. الرجال قوامون على النساء. And there's a number of reasons for that. They're mostly related to children, to raising children, because of the fact that a child basically needs about 12 years before it's on its own, unlike other creatures. I mean, most creatures quickly move into independence in the world. Children don't move into independence. It takes them a long time to become independent. And for the first few years, they're almost completely at the mercy of their caregivers. So men have to afford women the ability to maintain their children, and that's why women are the maintainers of children. So it's an order that in some ways is being rejected now, but it's rooted in a traditional understanding of what is best for all parties concerned. And because we believe it's from God, we're committed to it. There's people that can argue, I don't believe that or not, but we actually believe it's committed to God and that it's from God, and that much of what is happening now in America, the trouble that they have, the fact that they've got children going into schools and shooting children. I mean, you can say, well, it doesn't happen that often. Well, my God. I mean, just the fact that it's happening should be enough for major concern, because I think it's a testimony to our humanity that more of these type things aren't happening, given the type of situations that people are living in all over the world. I mean, if you look, the Europeans have no room, or the Americans have no room to point a finger at the Muslims about violence, because this is one of the most violent societies on the planet. If you look at the number of murders, if you look at the number of violent crimes of rape, and on and on. And if you just look at wars, 180 million people were killed in the 20th century in Western wars. 180 million. That is violent. So I believe that a lot of it has to do with dysfunctional households and the fact that children aren't being nurtured properly. That's important. Now, the two qualities about this religion, what are the two distinguishing characteristics of Islam? The two attributes. One of them, the Prophet ﷺ said, defined his religion. Mercy is one of them. He actually said every religion has a quality, in al-haya. So if you look at the idea of rahmah and haya, the beauty of this is that Allah is ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and you will get His rahmah if you have haya from Allah. See, if you have shame in doing anything that would displease your Lord, that's the best way of having the compassion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on you. Because then, even if you do wrong actions, you'll do them in secret. So He'll forgive you when you say astaghfirullah. But it's when you lose that shame, that modesty before Allah. See, not before creation. You lose it before Allah in secret. But once you lose it before His creation, what you do is you encourage other of His servants. So not only is your own soul corrupted, you have become now a corrupter of others. And that's why it's so terrible to do wrong actions publicly. All these type things that people do out there and encourage other people to do them. It's insidious. So if you look at these two qualities, these qualities are natural to women and they're acquired in men. Women by nature have rahmah and by nature have haya, with rare exception. And they're forced to lose it. Like in this culture, it's seen as a disease. If you're shy or if you're modest, it's seen now as something's wrong with you. So the beauty of the house is where this is meant to be nurtured in the children. That's what the mother's teaching the children. They have to be merciful to each other with animals. They pull the cat's tail and start pulling. You have to teach them, that's a sentient creature, and you take their hair and pull it around. And how do you like that? That's a creature. And my grandfather taught his grandchildren how to ride horses. And I remember this lesson. I was a young boy. He took a pencil or stick or something, and he put it in my mouth, and he yanked back really hard. And he said, never forget, that's what the horse feels when you're pulling that bit back. And I didn't forget that. I mean, that was a lesson, but that's a harsh way to teach mercy. But, the point is that we need to learn how to do that. Children need to learn how to be compassionate, and they can. And then you'll see children that have it by their nature. It's just good nature. They'll have it. Some children have it, but other ones you'll see cruel children. And there's a relationship between what kids do, like children that are known to torture animals will often end up being very violent people when they grow up. I mean, we have lots of social science studies that deal with this thing. And there were kids, most of you who grew up in this culture will remember these kids that put lighter fuel on an animal or put a cat in a thing and put it, in a creek or something like that. I mean, I remember that one boy that did that in the area that I grew up. So you will have those type of children. Those children, I mean, they're getting that from somewhere, first of all. I mean, in rare occasion, it's a bad seed, but usually it's something that it's learned behavior. But the point is that if they're gotten on time, you can save those people. They don't have to go that way. Women don't tend to have that, but they're getting it more and more. You see, you're having more women that are prone to violence and in this culture now because these qualities are not being inculcated anymore. So the first right, which is the most important one that a man has, is the right to sexual pleasure. There's people here that non-Muslims that will kind of might find that unusual or something like that. But the idea here is that if a woman is not menstruating, she should not refuse her husband if he desires to have relations. There's a number of reasons for that, and it comes from a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said if a man calls her wife to his bed and she refuses, then the angels supplicate against her. I mean, that's a hadith, and it's related in al-Bukhari. Ibn Hajar, in his commentary on that, he says that while a woman is obliged to avail herself sexually, that a man should also take into consideration her state. So it shouldn't be an abusive type, because again, in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِلْرِجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً, men have a degree over women. Ibn Abbas, who's the Tarjuman al-Quran, he is the interpreter of the Quran, he said it was that they are willing to give up their right, if needs be, but they won't stint their woman of her rights.